The scream stopped me mid-step. I was in the kitchen, pouring coffee, the smell of toast still lingering in the air. It was the kind of ordinary morning that makes you forget the world can turn cruel in a second. I didn't hear a crash, no breaking glass, just a sharp, short scream, the kind that punches silence and then disappears. I froze. My daughter was supposed to be in the garage, finishing a painting project she'd started the day before. She loved that space, her little corner of creativity where she could be messy, loud, and free. I called her name once, twice. No answer. Then I stepped outside and saw the door slightly ajar, just enough for a sliver of sunlight to land on the floor. And that's when I noticed it, a red streak, thick and uneven, trailing across the concrete. At first, I thought she had dropped paint, maybe spilled something, but the closer I got, the heavier my chest became. That wasn't paint. It was blood, fresh, dark, and terrifyingly real. My heart thudded in my ears as I pushed the door open and saw her. Collapsed on the floor, her small hands trembling, her white shirt soaked in red. Her legs were twisted beneath her, and her face, God, her face, was pale with pain, eyes wide with shock, but unable to cry. For a moment, I forgot how to move, how to breathe. The only thing I could do was fall to my knees beside her and scream her name. She blinked slowly, as if trying to understand what had just happened. And then I saw the hole in the wall. The smell of gunpowder. The silence pressing down around us like a suffocating fog. I grabbed my phone with shaking fingers and dialed 911, the numbers blurring as I begged them to hurry, to send someone, anyone, because my daughter was bleeding on the garage floor and I didn't know if she was going to make it. As I cradled her in my arms, whispering that help was coming, I looked across the street. Karen's front door was shut. Her porch was empty, but I already knew. I didn't have to see her face to know who did this. I just didn't know why. She was born with a laugh in her lungs and light in her eyes. From the moment I held her in my arms, I knew she was different, not in the way that makes doctors whisper behind clipboards or strangers offer sad, tilted smiles, but in the way she carried joy like it was something sacred, something she could hand to others just by being near them. My daughter didn't just brighten rooms. She warmed them. She was that kind of soul. We named her Lila after the lilac tree in my grandmother's backyard. It bloomed stubbornly, even in the toughest seasons. Lila was like that, fragile in body, maybe but unshakable in spirit. She was born with a mild neuromuscular condition that affected her coordination and made walking hard balance harder. Doctors gave us all the standard warnings early on. Milestones might come late, therapy would be necessary, and we'd have to prepare for a different kind of childhood. But what they didn't prepare us for was how beautifully different it would be, because Lila didn't see her challenges as limitations. She saw them as quirks, parts of her story, not the whole of it. She never liked shoes, always said they made her feel too grounded. Socks were her favorite, bright, mismatched, usually worn on slippery hardwood floors where she could spin like a top, arms out, giggling until she fell over. Dancing in socks was her thing. Every night, she'd insist on turning on music, usually some old cartoon soundtrack, and spin in circles until she got dizzy and collapsed into a pile of laughter. That was her version of freedom. She was obsessed with colors. I mean obsessed. Every drawing she made had rainbows, even if it was a picture of a house or a cat or a cloud. She once told me, "I think colors are how God speaks when he's not using words." I didn't know how a 6-year-old could say something like that, but she had a way of looking at the world that felt older than her years. She didn't have many friends in school. Some kids didn't understand why she needed braces on her legs or why she sometimes fell when she ran, but she never let that stop her. She made friends with the janitor, the crossing guard, the lunch lady. Anyone who smiled back became her people. She loved animals, especially cats. There was a stray that used to wander through our neighborhood, and she'd sit at the edge of our driveway with a saucer of milk and wait for it every evening. Most days it didn't come, but she still waited, whispering, "Maybe it's having a hard day." She had this incredible ability to give others the benefit of the doubt, even people who didn't deserve it. I used to worry about that, about how the world would treat someone so open-hearted. She trusted everyone, waved at strangers, greeted new neighbors with drawings she made and taped to their mailboxes. She even left one for Karen. Long before things turned dark, a crayon sketch of her in Karen's house with stick figures holding hands. Karen never acknowledged it. She loved questions. Every car ride became a TED Talk. Why do stars twinkle? If people lie down in snow, do they melt? If someone is mean but they love their dog, are they still mean? She didn't ask for answers. She asked for connection, for conversation. She wanted to wonder out loud. Our mornings were full of mismatched clothes, jelly on the countertops, and music spilling out of the bathroom where she brushed her teeth to the beat. Our nights were filled with stories. She loved fairy tales, but always rewrote the endings. Why does the prince always save the princess? Maybe the princess could save the dragon instead. She wanted a world that made more sense than the one she saw on TV. A kinder one. And in her own little way, she created it one chalk drawing at a time, one wave to a grumpy neighbor at a time. She didn't see danger in people. She saw potential. She didn't see cruelty as permanent. She saw it as sadness wearing a mask. She was light, pure, unapologetic, blinding light. That's why the day I found her bleeding on the floor, it didn't feel like just a tragedy. It felt like something sacred had been desecrated, like someone had taken aim at the very heart of innocence and fired without flinching. Because she wasn't just a little girl. She was proof that gentleness still exists in a world that forgets it far too often. And she trusted the world to be gentle in return. She trusted Karen. And that trust nearly cost her everything. When we first moved into the neighborhood, it felt like the beginning of a new chapter, calmer, quieter, safer. The kind of place where lawns were manicured, mailboxes matched, and children's laughter echoed lightly through the cul-de-sac. After years of bouncing between rentals and medical appointments, this little corner of suburbia offered something we'd been craving deeply: stability. The house itself wasn't huge, but it was warm, well-lit, and most importantly accessible for Lila. A gently sloped driveway, wide doorways, and a garage space we turned into her art nook. The HOA community promised order and safety, and we were willing to accept the rulebook in exchange for a sense of belonging. At first, everything seemed fine. Neighbors offered polite hellos, waved as we passed by. A few even dropped off welcome cookies, and Lila handed them crayon drawings in return. She loved sitting on the porch in the evenings, waving at joggers, mail carriers, or anyone who glanced her way. It was a good few weeks, simple, uneventful, almost blissful in its routine. For once, the world felt like it had slowed down, just enough for us to breathe. But even in that calm, there were shadows forming at the edges, quiet, watchful, waiting. One of them lived across the street. Karen was introduced to us by silence. She never came to welcome us, never smiled or waved. Her house was neat to the point of obsession. Hedges trimmed like military haircuts, porch swept daily, shutters repainted every few weeks. Lila waved at her every morning with bright eyes and hope in her voice, but Karen never waved back. She'd stare through her living room window, blinds half drawn, as if taking mental inventory of our movements. Still, we brushed it off. Not everyone's friendly, we told ourselves. Some people just take time. But then the notes started coming. The first one was taped to our mailbox. Please keep sidewalk clear for pedestrian use. We were confused. Lila's small wheelchair ramp, barely a few inches off the ground, was the only thing nearby. We complied anyway, slightly shifting it inward. The next week, another note appeared. Chalk drawings on public walkways violate community standards. That one stung. Lila had spent hours decorating the sidewalk with suns and butterflies. I gently tried to explain to her that maybe we needed to use the driveway instead. But she didn't understand. It's happy art, she said. It's for everyone. The HOA never contacted us directly, but more notes followed, each one a little more pointed than the last. Excessive van noise, referring to the therapy van that visited twice a week. Side yard clutter, likely pointing to Lila's tricycle and a few toys left out during the day. At no point did anyone knock on our door or ask us kindly. It was all passive, all anonymous, but it was clear who it came from. Karen's blinds would twitch every time we stepped outside. She'd come out to sweep leaves that didn't exist, only to linger near our property line, watching, judging. Then came the whispers. A neighbor mentioned that Karen had raised concerns at the last HOA meeting about families bringing down property values. Another told us Karen had lived here for over 15 years and liked things a certain way. We started noticing other residents pulling back too, no longer stopping to chat, no more waves from across the street. It wasn't outright hostility, but it was the kind of coldness that seeps into everything. You feel it in how long someone avoids eye contact, in the way doors close a little too quickly when you walk by. We tried to stay upbeat to protect Lila from the tension. She was still drawing, still waving at Karen every morning like clockwork, still leaving little notes on neighbors' steps that said, "Have a happy day," with glitter and smiley faces. And somehow, even with the growing tension, we convinced ourselves it would pass, that we could outlast the cold stares with warmth, that kindness could melt through cemented resentment. But it didn't. Karen's glares grew sharper, her notes more biting. We tried reporting the harassment to the HOA board, but they brushed it aside, calling it neighborly disagreements. No matter how clearly we described the pattern, targeted notes, photos taken of our home, even one instance where Karen stood outside for nearly 20 minutes watching Lila draw, they insisted they couldn't take sides. They said we needed to work it out ourselves. We didn't realize then just how deep her disdain ran. We thought it was about rules, about sidewalks and chalk. We didn't know it had grown into something darker, something that would one day crawl out of the shadows and put a gun in her hand. At the time, we still believed this was the calm before the storm. But we were already in it. We just hadn't heard the thunder yet. At first, Karen was just cold, aloof, withdrawn, a neighbor who kept to herself and looked the other way when we waved. But somewhere along the line, that coldness hardened into something sharper, something mean, something cruel. And it didn't happen all at once. It built slowly, like water dripping into a crack, until the foundation finally gives. It started with the notes, always unsigned, always worded just carefully enough to sound concerned, but dripping with disdain. One complained about our recycling bin being visible from the curb for too long. Another said that Lila's therapy van disturbed the peace of the cul-de-sac. When I tried to speak to Karen directly, she simply narrowed her eyes and said, "People move here for quiet, not constant commotion." I was stunned. We'd always been respectful of our surroundings. Lila wasn't loud. The therapy van was in and out in under an hour, twice a week. But I didn't argue. I thought maybe she just needed to get used to us. Maybe, in time, she'd see we weren't trying to disrupt anything. We were just trying to live like everyone else. I held on to that belief longer than I should have. Then she stopped pretending. One morning, Lila was outside drawing chalk butterflies on the sidewalk, her favorite thing to do, a little ritual she loved before her therapy sessions. I was inside watching through the window, smiling to myself, when I saw Karen come outside with a hose. Without a word, she began spraying the sidewalk, forcefully washing away Lila's drawings while my daughter sat just feet away, confused, holding her chalk. I ran out furious and asked what she was doing. She didn't even look at me. "I'm cleaning," she said flatly. "Sidewalks, not your personal art gallery." Lila looked up at me with tears welling in her eyes. She didn't understand, and I didn't know how to explain it to her without breaking something inside myself. That was the first time Karen made Lila cry. It wasn't the last. After that, Karen's hostility became more direct. She'd mutter insults under her breath when we passed. Once, while we were unloading groceries, she called out from her porch, "Maybe teach your daughter not to block the whole driveway with her chair." I turned, shocked. "She's a child," I snapped. "A disabled child." Karen rolled her eyes and said, "Everyone has something these days. Doesn't mean they get to be a disruption." That word stuck with me. Disruption. That's what she saw when she looked at Lila. Not a child, not a neighbor, not a human being. Just a disruption. It didn't stop there. Karen began making complaints to the HOA directly. We received formal notices about non-compliant outdoor equipment, referring to Lila's mobility ramp. Another about unauthorized decorations when we hung a small wind chime outside Lila's window, something she loved watching. I appealed, explained the circumstances, the medical need, but the HOA responded with boilerplate language. The association must maintain fairness and consistency. Fairness, it seemed, had become another word for silence. Then one day, Lila told me something that chilled me more than anything else. She said, "Karen doesn't like me." I asked her why she thought that. Because she said it, Lila replied. She told me I shouldn't be here, that I scare her dog, that I make too much noise when I laugh. I was frozen. I wanted to run across the street and scream at her, demand she explain herself, but I didn't. I couldn't, because I was afraid of what she might do if pushed. We installed a security camera after that, just a basic one pointing toward the driveway. Within a week, we found a note in our mailbox. Surveillance equipment may violate HOA policy. The irony was suffocating. Karen could watch us from her blinds all day long, but the moment we tried to feel safe, we were in violation. By then, Lila had started asking if she could stay inside more. She didn't want to draw outside anymore. She didn't want to wave at neighbors. The porch, which used to be her stage of joy, felt like a battlefield. She never said she was scared, but I could see it in her eyes. The hesitation, the flinch, whenever she heard a door slam across the street. Karen had taken something from her, something soft and precious. Her sense of safety, her innocence about the world. I tried everything, talking to the HOA, documenting every incident, hoping anyone would step in. But they wouldn't. It's a neighbor dispute, they said, not a legal matter. But it was more than that. It was a slow, calculated campaign of cruelty. And the worst part? We were still telling ourselves it couldn't possibly get worse, that she wouldn't actually do anything. We were wrong. We had no idea just how far Karen would go. It was a Saturday morning like any other, deceptively peaceful. The kind of morning where nothing seems urgent and you let your guard down just enough to feel human again. The sun was out, casting a soft glow over the neighborhood. Birds chirped lazily, the air was still, and everything felt unnaturally calm. I remember the smell of pancakes wafting from a kitchen, Lila's favorite. She'd already finished eating and had rushed out to the garage to start on her new chalk mural. She'd been planning it all week, a sky garden with rainbow wings, she called it. That was her world, butterflies, colors, joy. And she wanted to share it with everyone. She had set up her space in the garage, the door half open to let in the light. I could hear her humming softly to herself, a tune she made up, always different, but always sweet. She talked to her drawings while she worked, narrating stories as she drew each butterfly. This one's name is Luna. She likes blueberry pancakes. This one's scared of thunder, but very brave. I smiled from the kitchen, letting her be. It felt like a gift, that calm, something we hadn't had much of lately with all the tension, the complaints, the constant feeling of being watched. I told myself today would be different. I should have known better. It was around 9:30 when it happened. There was no warning, no scream, no angry voice, just a sound that shattered the air, a loud, sharp crack that didn't belong in a neighborhood like ours. For a second, I froze. My mind couldn't register it. A car backfiring, a tool dropped in someone's garage, but then came the silence, the kind that stretches too long, the kind that chokes. I ran. Instinct kicked in before thought. I sprinted to the garage barefoot, calling Lila's name. The moment I stepped in, I saw it, her body crumpled on the floor, chalk scattered around her, pink and blue smears blending with something darker. Blood, thick and vivid, pooling beneath her. Her hand was outstretched, still holding a broken piece of chalk. Her head was tilted awkwardly, her eyes wide, blinking slowly as if the pain hadn't caught up with her yet. I screamed, dropped to my knees beside her, heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the world. My hands hovered uselessly for a moment. I didn't know where to touch, what to do. Her face, her beautiful, expressive face, was streaked with blood. A clean tear through her cheek, dangerously close to her eye. Her lips were moving, trying to say something. I leaned in, and all I heard was, "It hurt." My hands were shaking as I dialed 911. I don't even remember what I said. Words poured out like water from a broken dam. Gun, child, blood, please, hurry. My voice cracked into something I didn't recognize. As I cradled her, rocking slightly, trying to keep pressure on the wound with my sleeve, I looked out the garage door. And I saw her, Karen, standing just a few feet away on her driveway, one hand at her side, the other holding a gun. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't crying. She was just standing there, like she had accidentally dropped a glass and was waiting to be scolded. Our eyes met. She didn't flinch. She didn't run. Instead, she said, "It was an accident." Her voice was flat, too calm, too rehearsed. I thought I heard something. I didn't know, but I wasn't listening. I was holding my bleeding daughter, praying she wouldn't close her eyes, praying she wouldn't stop breathing, praying that the ambulance would arrive before it was too late. Within minutes, the sirens came. Red and blue lights flooded the street, flashing against the garage walls like a surreal nightmare. Paramedics swarmed, pulling Lila from my arms, voices overlapping. "She's conscious. We've got a pulse. Prepare for transport." I followed the stretcher out, my legs barely working. Neighbors gathered, whispering, pointing, their faces a mix of concern and confusion. No one moved toward Karen. Police surrounded her, guns drawn, shouting commands. She slowly lowered her weapon, placing it on the ground like it was a purse. Still calm, still silent. She sat down on the curb, hands on her knees, as if waiting for a bus, not like someone who had just shot a child. They let her speak to the officers right there. She repeated her line. She heard a noise, thought someone was in her yard, thought it was a threat. "It was just a warning shot," she said. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone." But that's the thing. She did hurt someone. She hurt Lila, physically, emotionally, permanently. She shattered a little girl's sense of safety, her joy, her freedom. And she didn't even try to help. She didn't drop the gun and run over. She didn't scream. She just stood there, waiting. That was the day everything changed. The day Karen's cruelty stopped being quiet. The day her hate grew loud enough to leave a scar. And while Lila would survive, she would never be the same. Neither would we. Because once you hear the sound of a gunshot echoing through a place you thought was safe, you never forget it. You never unhear it. And you never forgive the silence that followed. The ambulance was a blur of flashing lights and chaos. But all I could see was her, Lila, strapped to the stretcher, her tiny hands limp, her face pale, beneath the blood-soaked bandages. I tried to climb in after her, but a paramedic stopped me, holding out a gloved hand. "We'll stabilize her, ma'am. Just meet us at County General." His voice was calm, clinical, utterly detached. I nodded, but my heart was somewhere else, somewhere back on that garage floor, still trying to understand what had just happened. I don't remember driving to the hospital. I barely remember the stoplights or the turns. All I remember is my chest tightening with every passing second. I kept seeing her face, her blinking eyes, the blood running into her ear, the chalk crushed beneath her elbow like a forgotten toy. I kept hearing that sound, the crack of the gunshot and Karen's flat voice. It was an accident, like she had knocked over a plant. Like it was nothing. When I reached the ER they rushed me through, the nurses knew who I was before I said a word. One of them led me to a waiting room that smelled of antiseptic and anxiety, a windowless box with a single humming light overhead. I sat in a chair that was too cold and too hard, staring at my hands still stained with Lila's blood. It was drying now, curling around the creases in my palms. I couldn't look away. The doctor came out 20 minutes later, though it felt like years. His face was serious, but not panicked. "She's stable," he said. "The bullet grazed her cheekbone, missed her eye by a matter of millimeters. She's going to need stitches, and we're monitoring for trauma and infection, but she's alive." Alive. The word felt heavy, precious. I thanked him, but My throat closed around the words. I wasn't ready to feel relief. Not yet. When I finally saw her, she was unconscious, hooked up to wires and machines that beeped softly in the dark. Her face was swollen, stitched, and bruised. One arm was wrapped, her fingers curled like she was still holding that chalk. I sat beside her, brushing her hair back with shaking hands, whispering her name over and over. Lila, baby, Mama's here. Meanwhile, the world outside was already beginning to bend the truth. Karen had told the police she thought someone was breaking into her yard, that she heard movement near the hedge and, frightened, fired a warning shot. It was just a misfire, she insisted. I didn't see the girl. She didn't even call 911. She didn't offer help. She stood there while my daughter bled and waited, as if the consequences might somehow pass her by, and somehow they did. They didn't handcuff her. They didn't arrest her. After a brief statement and a short conversation with the officers, Karen went back inside her house. That night, while I sat in the hospital praying for my daughter to wake up, Karen slept in her own bed, surrounded by walls she painted, flowers she pruned, and silence she weaponized. There was no justice that day, no apology, no recognition of the pain she caused, just blood, sirens, and a community so afraid to pick a side that it chose not to see a child lying broken on the floor. And that kind of silence is the loudest violence of all. In the days that followed the shooting, while we were still in the hospital praying over Lila's stitched-up face and unresponsive body, Karen wasted no time doing what she does best, controlling the narrative. Before we could even process what had happened, before our daughter could even open her eyes, Karen had already started spinning her version of events. And to our shock, people started listening. It began subtly. A vague post appeared in the neighborhood Facebook group that read, "Deeply shaken by a recent incident. Praying for all involved. Fear is a terrible thing, especially when you're just trying to protect your home." It didn't mention names. It didn't need to. Everyone knew what had happened. The comments came flooding in. So, sorry you're going through this. You did what you thought was right. We stand with you, Karen. I read them in the hospital waiting room, numb, while my daughter lay unconscious with a line of stitches on her cheek and monitors attached to her chest. Karen was playing the role of the misunderstood neighbor, the fragile woman who was startled into firing a gun. She claimed she heard a rustling in her yard and thought it was a wild animal. She never said she saw Lila, because admitting that would mean admitting she fired a weapon at a child. So she didn't. She made it about fear, about protection, about how the world is so unsafe these days. And then came the next post, shared anonymously, but clearly coming from someone in her circle. It's sad what people will do to get attention and sympathy. Not everything is a crime. Some people just want to be victims. That was the moment the knife twisted. Suddenly, we weren't just grieving parents. We were manipulators, grifters, accusers. And Karen, the woman with the gun, was now the one being bullied online, harassed, unjustly judged. We went to the HOA for support, expecting, hoping, for a statement condemning violence. Instead, we received a carefully worded email. The HOA encourages all residents to refrain from speculation and allow law enforcement to conduct its investigation. We remain neutral in all civil or criminal matters between homeowners. Neutral. A child was shot in her own garage, and they called it neutrality. Not a single word about concern for Lila. Not one acknowledgement that something horrific had happened. Just silence and an implicit warning to stay quiet. Worse, some of our neighbors bought into Karen's story. A few even stopped responding to our texts. The same people who had once waved at Lila now avoided eye contact. One neighbor told us she wasn't taking sides, but then added, "Karen's always been so careful about safety. She must have really been afraid." As if fear justifies firing a gun toward a child. We were no longer seen as victims. We were seen as a problem. Our GoFundMe, created to cover Lila's medical expenses, was shared in group chats with captions like, "Interesting timing, right?" Someone even suggested we were exploiting the situation for money, as if we wanted this. as if any parent would trade their child's safety for sympathy. Karen knew exactly what she was doing. She didn't just shoot a bullet, she shot a story into the community. A story in which she was the one in danger, she was the one suffering, and we were the ones causing trouble. And for a terrifying moment, that lie started to work. But we weren't going to let it stand. We weren't chasing money. We were chasing the truth. After the hospital released Lila, and we brought her home, pale, stitched, and too quiet for a child who once danced in socks, something inside us changed. We weren't just grieving anymore. We were furious. Furious at the silence, at the neighbors who nodded but said nothing, at the HOA that issued no comment emails, and most of all, at Karen. Because while our daughter struggled to sleep through the night without jolting awake in panic, Karen walked her dog down the street like nothing ever happened. Like she hadn't pulled a trigger. Like she hadn't shattered a life. So we decided to fight back. The first step was hiring a lawyer. It took time. We had to find someone willing to take a civil case against a neighbor in a private HOA, someone who wouldn't be intimidated by bureaucracy or community politics. We found her in a woman named Denise Grant, a civil rights attorney with a reputation for standing up to exactly this kind of systemic silence. She sat in our living room, read through the medical records, the HOA notices, our written timeline of events, and simply said, "They're hoping you'll go away. We won't." Together, we began building our case, Lila's medical records, therapy notes, psychological assessments, security camera footage, and the string of ignored HOA complaints. Denise sent letters to the HOA demanding records of previous complaints, board meeting minutes, anything that might show a pattern of negligence or bias. We knew it wouldn't be easy, but we weren't going to let Karen's lies become the official version of our story. But then came the backlash. Someone leaked our GoFundMe in a local Facebook group, suggesting we were using the child to raise money and pushing a narrative for attention. The comments were brutal, accusing us of exaggerating, of playing the victim, of trying to cancel Karen. It was like being shot all over again, only this time with words. People didn't see a scarred little girl, they saw a controversy, a disruption, an inconvenience. That's when we knew we had to go public. We reached out to a local news outlet and told our story, every painful detail, every ignored warning sign, every moment of silence that followed the gunshot. Lila's picture, with her butterfly clips and gentle smile, was shared alongside the headline. Family seeks justice after daughter shot by neighbor. And something shifted. People started listening. The comments changed. Support poured in. Donations came without judgment. Other families shared their stories of being targeted, dismissed, overlooked. We weren't alone anymore. We weren't just fighting for Lila. We were fighting for every family who'd been told to stay quiet. And we were just getting started. The courtroom was sterile and cold, but charged with an invisible tension that pressed against our lungs with every breath. This wasn't just a legal proceeding, it was a reckoning. After months of being doubted, dismissed, and painted as the aggressors, we were finally here, facing the woman who nearly killed our daughter. Karen sat just feet away from us, dressed modestly in gray, her hair neatly pinned, her expression carefully blank. But when the cameras flashed and the jury was seated, she slipped on the mask she had worn so well throughout this nightmare. The role of the misunderstood, frightened woman who made a tragic mistake. Her lawyers painted a picture of a woman who lived alone, fearful of rising crime, startled by a sudden movement in her yard. They called it a moment of panic. They said she deeply regretted what happened, and as she sniffled on the stand, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, it was clear she knew the performance. But while she cried for herself, Lila sat quietly beside me, clutching a soft toy in her lap, her face still bearing the scar Karen's bullet had left behind. A faint, pale line across her cheek that said more than any testimony ever could. When I took the stand, I told them everything. Not just about the shooting, but the months before it, the notes, the stares, the whispered complaints, the slow erosion of peace. I spoke of my daughter's joy, her innocence, her love for sidewalk chalk and dancing in socks. And I told them what I saw that day in Karen's eyes. Not panic, but calculation. Not fear, but anger. Controlled. deliberate. Our lawyer presented the medical records, the photographs, the HOA reports we had been quietly documenting. We even showed Karen's social media posts, her attempt to spin the narrative, her refusal to take responsibility. The jury watched, silent and still, as images of Lila's bloodied face were shown on the screen. The room felt heavy, uncomfortable, real. When the verdict finally came, time seemed to freeze. Guilty. Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Reckless endangerment. Community endangerment. There was no cheering, no victory lap. Just a quiet gasp, the release of breath we hadn't known we were holding. Karen was taken into custody immediately, her face still blank. Her mask had finally cracked. And outside that courthouse, people were waiting, not just media but supporters. Strangers who had followed our story. Mothers. Fathers. Families who saw themselves in us. It wasn't total justice, but it was something. It was acknowledgement. It was a beginning. We moved 3 months after the trial, not because we were running, but because we needed to breathe again, someplace new, someplace that didn't hold echoes of sirens, blood, and betrayal behind perfectly trimmed hedges. Our old house was never just bricks and wood. It had been Lila's world. Her butterflies, her chalk drawings, her laughter, it had soaked into the walls. But after the shooting, none of it felt the same. The light that used to pour through the garage now just made the stain on the floor more visible. So we left. Our new home is smaller, quieter, but warmer in all the ways that count. No HOA. No neighbors pretending not to stare. Just space to heal. Lila has her own little art room now, filled with canvases, paints, and the soft hum of music she chooses herself. She started dancing again, too, socks on hardwood floors, spinning in slow, careful circles. She still stumbles, but she always gets back up. And when she laughs, it's not quite the same as it was before. It's softer now, a little guarded, but it's coming back. She still wears her butterfly clips, still draws rainbows, still tells stories about imaginary animals with names like Sparkle and Wiggle Paws. But now, when she hears a loud bang, thunder, a dropped book, even fireworks, she flinches. She looks to the door. Her innocence is still intact, but it has scars now, just like her cheek. One night, as I tucked her in, she asked, "Is it okay to be happy again?" I told her it's not just okay, it's necessary. Happiness is how we fight back. It's how we keep going. We may never forget what happened, but we refuse to let it define us. She still wears socks to dance, but now with one eye always on the door. And yet, she dances anyway. Because healing isn't forgetting. It's choosing joy, even when you know what the world is capable of. And in this new home, with each cautious smile and every bold brushstroke she paints, we're building something stronger than safety. We're building hope. If this story touched your heart, don't let it fade into silence. Share this video, leave a comment, and help us shine a light on the voices that are too often ignored. No family should have to fight alone. No child should lose their sense of safety because of someone else's hate. Backhand index pointing right, subscribe to the HOA stories for more real, raw, and powerful stories of families standing up to injustice. Because when the community turns its back, we turn on the truth.